Hey everybody, this is Perch. I'm going to get a little nostalgic. That's probably not the right word here, but this will be like some old man talk. Although I'm not a boomer. I'm very proudly and very solidly Gen X, which I guess is turning into old and creepy. I don't know. Gen X is weird. There's a lot of jokes made about boomers, and then you got a lot of jokes made about millennials and everything else. And Gen X kind of just sits there. I'm sure not people just don't know what to do with it. It's like they're not quite old enough to really make fun of them. I'm sure people do, but at any rate, what where I'm going with this, um, I'm not claiming in this conversation to speak for everybody. I'm sure I don't. I'm not claiming that it's all this way. I'm not claiming that the kind of bad behavior you see at different times online is all kind of traces back to this. I'm sure it's not. I'm giving you my perspective, and it could be a perspective of one, a dozen, hundreds. I have no idea, and so I'm not claiming to talk to anyone or talk for anyone but myself. That's it. That's all I'm talking to. You can tell me in the comments if you want to latch onto this or not. It's up to you. It's fine. This is not me speaking for everybody. Uh, when I was, I was in young, when I was in certainly, middle school and high school, college, I listened and watched and read a lot of different things. I read, I read and consumed entertainment from many different creators, from many different countries, of many different races, of many different nationalities, of many different genders. I just all that. Um, there is something that it does bug me that there's this kind of attitude sometimes that all of the diversity that has come about happened in the last 5 years. It's like 5, 10 years ago. Then suddenly it's like, oh, you realize there's all these other things and you haven't been accepting it. It's like, no, many of these things were around for a very long time. Somebody I like, just and it's I'll throw out. I go right to a white guy first, but Henry Rollins was somebody that I listened to. Listened to Black Flag. I liked his spoken word stuff. He wrote a lot of books. This was long before he kind of weighed into the whole political debates and everything, and I think in some ways kind of reinvented himself in much the same way, by the way, that Michael Moore did. If you remember Michael Moore when he first came onto the scene, with Roger and Me and some of his early stuff. Like there's a bit on his TV show where he took a bullhorn and he went outside like the Ford motor plant. And he was trying to get the executives to come down and see if they could change a tire on a car, change the oil, just something basic. And like I think it was a guy from Ford. One of them did. Like the executive comes out, like rolls up the button-up shirt and gets under a car and changes. It's a great photo op. But it was the point of that was to kind of talk about class structure but it wasn't this kind of angry preachy kind of chaos. There was definitely some politics to it. There was definitely some level of right versus left, but it was just very, very different than it is today. Henry Rollins in his spoken word stuff would talk about just various kind of aspects of racism and other things, but it was again it was very different than today. It was more of a we've here's some things to think about. Here's some ways that we all can relate to each other. It wasn't this, hey, half the country is evil and bad. We've got to murder them because they're terrible. We can't listen to them. We can't talk about them. We can't hear. We got to somehow erase them from existence. You didn't have that. I got kind of started on this thinking because picked up. I kind of simultaneously came across two pieces of media. First appearance of Jon Stewart. Great comic, great character. Has been one of my favorite characters. Legitimately one of my favorite characters. I was drawing something the other night where I was recreating the panel where Monica Rambeau, who was Captain Marvel at that time, accepts the leadership of the Avengers from kind of Captain America nominates her, and she realizes she's up to the challenge. And I was looking at that comic, and I was looking at that moment, trying to understand why I liked it. Why? I'm trying to test kind of my own not biases, but kind of why. I say I like Monica Rambeau, but why? Is it just because do I truly like the character, or is it just that I don't like the fact that she was kind of erased and Carol was put into that spot of Captain Marvel? And reading those comics again, I realized no, I love the character. I love the journey. I love the fact that she came onto the scene. She was really uncertain. She had some amazing moments. She had some very heroic moments. And she showed kind of this natural gift at leadership in much the same way that, Captain America had showed this natural gift for not just inspiring people, but being kind of a good field general about figuring out kind of this is the right way we want to respond to that threat. And the whole story, the whole character was built up really, really well. Rhodey was built up really, really well as how he was a very different person from Tony Stark, and very valuable as a character and as a a piece of that kind of comic and that character's history. At the same time, as I find this guy in another box, I come across an old cassette tape. For the kids who don't know what that is, this used to be how people had to listen to music. It was terrible. You had to rewind it. It was awful. But it did give people in the '80s a chance to make mixtapes for girls they were hoping to take home. I don't, like suddenly, like in mid stride, there censored that for kids. There you go. But I found an old cassette tape of the Two Live Crew. Now, I have no idea if anyone remembers that band, but it was the band in the USA, and I had many. I had a lot of the Two Live Crew. I liked the Two Live Crew. I would listen to it, and it has some funny obscenities, and it was just funny. And they were talented, good people. And I'm thinking to myself how strange it is that in 2021 we're seeing these press releases of people who are being put on comics, writing comics, characters that are getting attention, other things, and the press releases are acting like this has never happened before. And worse, not only is it acting like it never happened before, but it's also kind of subtly suggesting that comics, not really weirdly, in this very weird kind of Vulcan mind trick way, not the creators, but the readers, are somehow super awful people for not buying the fact that you weren't buying these comics earlier make you terrible, and now we've got something for you, and now finally, the diverse audience is going to get what they want. And this is combined with the fact that I've done some interviews lately, whether it was Nancy Collins, Bill Loeb, and it's curious because there were a large list of women writing amazing comics, of transgender writers, Rachel Pollack writing Doom Patrol. There were transgender characters in Doom Patrol, in other comics, certainly more within the Indies and Vertigos. That no doubt about it, wasn't showing up in the flagship Marvel books. But you had a black man take over for Tony Stark. You had Milestone, which was some pretty badass comics. I mean, those were great comics when they came out. You had a large assortment of pretty cool characters, pretty diverse characters, pretty progressive things that happened in comics throughout the '80s and the '90s. People like to kind of crap on John Byrne's She-Hulk, and they show the picture of like She-Hulk jump roping naked, and they're like, this is this example of kind of sexism in comics. You could look at it that way, sure. I agree. You got to kind of put it in some context, though. The context was John Byrne was making fun of comics and making fun of needing to do cheap cheesecake stunts to appeal to the executives at Marvel in order to get more sales on the book. And She-Hulk was there breaking the fourth wall and was ridiculing the fact that this was stupid. And so for some reason that part always gets lost. The part where John Byrne was basically trying to point out how ridiculous it all was. They're like, well, I bet she's naked and jump roping. It's I think, and this is the part where I'm speaking just for me. What irritates me about comics today, about the behavior, about this, what often feels like this preachy, you're wrong kind of mode, is that for many comic readers, but I'm talking for myself, I was on board with all this stuff 30 years ago, before many people were born. it is slightly painful. I feel old when I see comic writers like some of the X crew talking about how it's like, oh, I grew up with Grant Morrison on New X-Men. When I was in elementary school reading that Grant Morrison on New X-Men, I knew I wanted to be in comics. I'm like, oh, fuck you. So sorry. Sorry. I just, I'm like, okay, you're, it's, I was certainly, past elementary school, but it just makes me wonder, like, did any of you go back a little bit? Did any of you go back to Vertigo when it was first launched and check out some of the creators and check out some of the characters and check out what they were doing there? Were you aware that, in Wally West Flash, the Pied Piper was came out as being gay? I think this was the '80s. Were you aware that this stuff takes place? And I get angry or frustrated when I'm being lectured by people who, their comic kind of understanding began with 2004 Grant Morrison X-Men, and they want to lecture everybody about how comics were not progressive and now they are. And they point to things like, oh, Power Girl has that boob window and kind of other aspects, which, yes, she did, but are you, again, that's one moment in time. That's one character. That's one part of comics. There's decades and decades of comics and storylines and diverse characters and interesting situations that are going on there. And I'm not on board for this memory reset of, if it didn't happen between 2000, if it didn't happen after 2005, it didn't exist. And so we all get to walk around patting each other on the backs and giving each other awards for being the very first person to introduce a gay character in a comic, because I feel like that's giving the finger to a lot of people who, frankly, were a lot braver, a lot more talented, and we're doing these things 15, 20, 25 years before you. And those are the shoulders you're standing on. Do people now get a script that says, I'm proud to have this job. I stand on the shoulders of giants like Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko and other people that I'm sure exist, but I don't know who they are because I'm not going to bother to learn any of their names after I read this script. Is that what's going on? Because there's a lot of cool things to comics. A lot. There was a lot of diversity in comics that existed before you. And it doesn't mean you can't be proud of the efforts you're doing now. If you're putting out a good story and you're trying hard and you're doing good things, you should be proud. But you weren't first. And stop pretending like you were. That's the part that gets me annoyed. And I don't know if that's what irks other people. I don't know if that's part of what's going on here. But I don't like history being erased. And comics was cool to a lot of people in the 80s for how many different ideas there were, how many cool things. A black woman led the Avengers in the 80s. That happened. The kind of the villain in that arc coming up was the fat, bald white guy, Dr. Druid. he was mind controlled. He wasn't. Nebula was talking. It's always the blue skinned woman that's the villain. That's what we do know. No, I'm just kidding. That wasn't Nebula. It's a Kang. Just go read the comics. It's complicated. Just go read the comics. But Dr. Druid was a douche, and he was dead for a while. But I guess now he's back, or I don't know what's going on. Anyway, it's exhausting to me. I'm being as honest and truthful as I can. It's exhausting to me, this dynamic, because there's fighting, and people want to fight over American Chavez, or they're fighting over what book Mags is on, or anything else. And I sit here going, in the 80s and the 90s, we had a lot of really cool things that were created. And to stand here proudly with those comics bagged and boarded in boxes, to be very, very proud of that history, which I am, and to be told, no, that We need to make comics diverse and get them out of these these racists who were collecting comics. These old dudes who are collecting comics. We got to get rid of it. That offends me. It bugs me. I wish it didn't, but it does. It bugs me because I don't feel like anybody knows what they're talking about. And people who don't take the effort to learn their history, in many cases, I don't find worth listening to. So again, I don't know why everybody is pissed off and why people are what their true motivations are, what's in their heart. I don't know. And I can't guess. I can't look in there. But I can look in mine. And for me, it's erasing what was a really cool history. That's what bugs me. There's a lot of these creators who did really brave, cool things. And in the 80s, yeah, it was certainly more brave to handle some of these topics. It absolutely was. You're going to make Iron Man a black guy? It was a hell of a lot more brave and a hell of a lot more of a risk for the writer, for the artist, for the creator, for the company back then than it is now. And we're supposed to sit here and go, it's those old comic fans, bunch of bigots. I don't think so. That bugs me. That's my frustration with the whole thing. There's a lot of people who in comics who support a lot of things, and that shouldn't be flushed down the toilet because we want to make a statement in 2021. Is this you? I don't know. Let me know in the comments below. Is this where you're coming from? Is this what irks you? This is what irks me. Thanks for listening.